The alien queen's voice shook the hall. Who fixed this? Only a human dared to answer. The Galactic Council's hall was vast beyond imagination. Its walls shimmered with colors that no human eye had names for, shifting and flowing like liquid gems. Towers of crystal rose from the floor, their surfaces reflecting light that came from no visible source. Hundreds of beings, representing countless species from every corner of the galaxy, filled the hall. Some floated in the air, some had limbs like trees, and others had eyes that seemed to look into the very soul of anyone who met their gaze. In the center, a massive device dominated the floor, a complex lattice of metal and energy, glowing with blue-white light, pulsing like a heartbeat. It was called the Interstellar Communicator, capable of sending messages instantaneously across thousands of light years. Humans were rare here. Only a few were allowed to attend the council, and most of them felt dwarfed by the size and elegance of the chamber. One human, however, stood out, not because of size, but because of calm presence. Eli Carter, a young engineer from Earth, had been assigned to help maintain the Interstellar Communicator. While others marveled at the hall, Eli's eyes stayed on the machine, noting small irregularities, flickering lights, and vibrations that others ignored. Suddenly, the hum of the communicator shuddered and cut off. A deep silence fell, broken only by the crackle of energy in the lattice. The machine blinked erratically, and a spark shot across one of its conduits. Panic rose among the council members. The alien delegates began shouting in their own tongues, a chorus of high-pitched whistles, low growls, and clicking sounds. Then, from the raised dais at the far end of the hall, a voice boomed, a voice that shook the very floor beneath them. Who fixed this? The alien queen had arrived. She was enormous, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with an iridescent exoskeleton that reflected the hall's shifting lights. Her eyes were like molten gold, observing everything with sharp intelligence. Her voice carried a natural vibration, resonating through the walls and making even the largest creatures feel off balance. When she spoke, the room seemed to tremble in fear and awe. The council fell silent. No alien dared step forward. They all looked at one another, waiting for someone braver, or perhaps more foolish than themselves to speak. The tension was suffocating. Eli Carter, however, did not move. He stood near the broken machine, hands slightly trembling but his gaze steady. He had been monitoring the communicator when it faltered and already knew what had caused the problem. A misaligned energy conduit in the device's core. It was something small yet critical, something that required someone to get close and carefully adjust it. The queen's gaze fell upon him. For a moment, Eli felt the pressure as if the air itself were weighing down on him. Around him, the delegates shifted uneasily. He could feel their eyes on him, full of disbelief and fear. Then, taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. I fixed it, he said, his voice steady, though quiet compared to the queen's thunderous tone. A ripple of surprise passed through the hall. Some delegates whispered to one another, their alien voices mixing into a low murmur. The queen tilted her head, considering him. You what? She said, her tone sharp, cutting through the whispers. You claim you fixed the interstellar communicator, a human, a creature of such primitive design. Eli didn't flinch. He had rehearsed his explanation, though he hadn't expected to do it in front of the entire council. Yes, Your Majesty, I noticed the conduit had shifted slightly out of alignment. It caused the energy feedback to destabilize the system. I corrected it. There was a pause. The queen's eyes narrowed. She leaned forward slightly, and her voice dropped to a low, threatening hum that made the floor vibrate. Explain now, or leave your body here to the council's judgment. Eli swallowed. His mind raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. The conduit was misaligned because of thermal expansion. The device's energy flows are precise, and a small shift can cause the entire system to fail. I recalibrated the alignment and reinforced the stabilizers. The communicator is now fully operational. Another pause. The queen's glowing eyes scanned him from head to toe. Then she gestured sharply, and a holographic display of the machine appeared in the air above the floor. Streams of blue light traced through its pathways. Eli pointed to one section. This part here, he said, was the main cause. The conduit shifted by less than a millimeter, but at this scale it created feedback that overloaded the energy matrix. I restored it to its proper alignment and verified the energy flows were stable. For the first time in the hall's history, the queen leaned back slightly, as if intrigued rather than angry. The other delegates whispered among themselves, their fear mingling with curiosity. One of the alien engineers, a creature with multiple arms and segmented eyes, floated closer. How did you notice that?" it asked, its voice a series of clicking tones. Eli shrugged slightly. "Observation, patience, and understanding how energy behaves under stress." The Queen's gaze returned to him, and her tone rose again, more demanding than before. "Do you realize what you claim, human? You repaired a device that took centuries of collective knowledge to build, a machine that connects every corner of our galaxy. One mistake in communication could collapse, isolating entire civilizations. Do you understand the weight of this act?" "I do," Eli replied calmly, "and I take responsibility for my actions." The room was quiet again. The delegates could hardly believe what they were seeing. No alien had dared speak to the Queen in this way, and certainly none had dared to repair the device themselves. But Eli was human, and humans, despite being smaller and seemingly fragile compared to most species, had something the others often underestimated: courage, intuition, and the ability to act when hesitation might cost everything. The Queen rose slightly from her throne, her enormous form casting a shadow across the hall. "You are brave," she said almost to herself, "or foolish, perhaps both. Explain your reasoning. Convince me that your actions were not reckless." Eli nodded. "I watched the feedback loops and noticed the anomaly in the conduit. I could see that the system was trying to stabilize itself, but it needed intervention to prevent a complete shutdown. I acted immediately. The repair was small but precise. I ensured that no other part of the system would be affected." There was a long silence. The other delegates were stunned. Some began to whisper words of admiration in their own languages. A few looked uncomfortable, realizing that a human had done what none of them dared. Finally, the Queen spoke again, her voice still powerful but tinged with curiosity. "You fixed it, and you survived. Tell me, human, why should I not test your abilities further? Why should I allow one so small and seemingly fragile to claim competence over such a device?" Eli's heart raced, but he maintained his composure. "Because I will do it again if needed, and because my knowledge, while small, is not limited by arrogance or fear. I solve problems by understanding them and acting decisively. That is what the communicator required." The Queen studied him for several long minutes. Then, slowly, she sat back in her throne. "Perhaps there is more to humans than I believed," she murmured. A low murmur of approval spread across the hall. The delegates began to look at humans differently. Not as small, fragile creatures, but as beings capable of unpredictable courage and skill. Eli felt a small surge of pride, but remained focused on the device. He had survived the first challenge. The Queen's test, however, was far from over. Above them, the interstellar communicator hummed steadily once more, its blue-white light pulsing evenly, like a heartbeat at rest. It was a small victory, but in the halls of the Galactic Council, even a small victory could change history. Eli looked around, knowing that this was only the beginning. He had stepped forward when others stayed silent. He had dared to act when the galaxy itself seemed to hesitate. And though the Queen's scrutiny was far from over, one thing was clear: human ingenuity had made its mark. The hall was silent for what felt like an eternity. Every delegate's eyes were fixed on the human standing near the repaired interstellar communicator. Eli Carter remained calm, though his heart still pounded with excitement and fear. He had successfully fixed the device, but he knew the Queen's test was far from over. The alien Queen, massive and imposing, leaned forward slightly. Her iridescent armor shimmered, reflecting the glowing blue lights of the communicator. "Human," she said, her voice vibrating across the hall, "you have repaired what others feared, yet repair alone does not prove mastery. Tell me, why should I not put you to a trial? A trial where your courage, skill, and ingenuity are tested against challenges no other species could endure." Eli took a deep breath. The room seemed to shrink around him, the grandeur of the hall pressing on every sense. Delegates whispered in their languages, some skeptical, some amazed. Yet Eli knew this was the moment where humans could prove their worth to the galaxy. "I accept," he said simply, his voice calm but confident. "Whatever challenge you see fit, I will face it." The Queen's glowing eyes studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she lifted a clawed hand. With a gesture, the communicator's surface shimmered and shifted, forming a complex holographic puzzle that hovered in midair. Blue lines crisscrossed, connecting nodes that pulsed with energy. Small sparks jumped between the nodes, signaling instability. "This," the Queen said, is the Nexus alignment grid. It monitors energy flow across multiple star systems. One misalignment, one mistake, and entire communication networks can collapse. Only beings with perfect knowledge and flawless intuition can stabilize it. I want to see if you can do it. Eli stepped closer, examining the holographic grid. Lines of energy twisted and turned in patterns he had never seen before. Yet, despite the complexity, he noticed something the others overlooked, a subtle rhythm in the pulse of energy. It was almost as if the grid itself were alive, seeking guidance from someone who understood its flow. You will have 1 hour, the Queen continued. Fail, and your audacity will be judged by the Council. The delegates gasped. 1 hour was almost nothing for such a complex system. Many alien engineers whispered among themselves, shaking their heads in disbelief. No species would dare attempt such a task without days of preparation. But Eli did not flinch. He had a mind trained to observe, analyze, and act under pressure. Eli's fingers hovered in the air, tracing the lines of energy. He began identifying weak points, areas where feedback loops were unstable, nodes that were out of balance, conduits vibrating with misaligned energy. Every second counted. Around him, the council murmured in amazement. Some tried to understand his actions, but his approach was unlike anything they had seen. He did not rely on brute strength or complicated formulas. He watched, observed patterns, and adjusted with precision. Minutes passed, and Eli moved with focus and care. A small adjustment here, a redirection of energy there. The grid responded immediately, stabilizing sections of the Nexus alignment grid. Sparks that had threatened to burst into dangerous arcs dimmed and flowed smoothly along the lines. The Queen leaned forward, her eyes narrowing in curiosity. Interesting, she murmured. You act without hesitation, yet without arrogance. Most species would attempt a brute force solution. Humans, you observe, understand, and act. Eli did not respond. Words would only slow him. Instead, he focused, mapping the energy patterns in his mind. He noticed a hidden feedback loop, nearly invisible, that had caused the initial instability. It was clever, designed to prevent tampering by anyone not trained in the most advanced energy manipulation techniques. Yet for humans, subtle observation and intuitive reasoning often revealed what complexity tried to hide. Eli adjusted the hidden loop carefully, watching as energy pulses aligned, synchronized, and then stabilized the entire system. The holographic grid began to glow steadily, a serene blue-white light spreading across the nodes. Some delegates gasped audibly. Others whispered that they had never seen such a method. Even the Queen leaned back slightly, her massive form reflecting thoughtfulness rather than anger. Eli's fingers moved faster now, responding to minor fluctuations. The energy lines hummed with perfect rhythm, and the dangerous sparks that had threatened to erupt disappeared. He felt a surge of confidence, realizing that his intuition and experience had guided him through a challenge that would have overwhelmed almost anyone else. The final seconds ticked down. Eli took a deep breath and completed the last adjustment. The holographic grid stabilized completely, glowing with a smooth, unbroken light. The hall erupted, not with applause but with awe. Delegates whispered in astonishment, some bowing slightly to acknowledge his skill. The alien Queen's voice cut through the whispers, calm yet resonant. You have done what I did not expect. You have stabilized the Nexus alignment grid in far less time than any other species could manage. You have proven courage, intelligence, and precision. Humans, you are more capable than I imagined. Eli lowered his hands, breathing steadily. Though exhausted, he felt a quiet pride. For the first time, he knew that humans were no longer underestimated in the galaxy. His actions had shifted the perception of an entire council of advanced species. One of the alien delegates, a towering creature with crystal-like skin, floated forward. Human, it said in a deep, resonant voice. How did you know where to begin? Most of us would have spent hours just understanding the grid. Eli smiled slightly. I looked for the problem, not the complexity. The answer is usually where the system resists the most. Observation and careful adjustment often solve problems faster than brute force. The Queen studied him silently for a moment. Then she rose slightly, her enormous form casting shadows across the hall. You are audacious, human. Few have your courage to stand before me, and fewer still can match your skill. Perhaps there is a place for your kind among us after all. Eli nodded, realizing that this moment was more than just personal achievement. It was a step forward for humanity in the galaxy. Humans had been seen as small, fragile, and unpredictable. Now Eli's actions had shown the Council that human ingenuity, courage, and intuition could solve problems that other species could not. Yet the Queen was not done. She tilted her head slightly, a sign that Eli had not yet encountered the full extent of her judgment. "There is more," she said almost softly. "This was a test of skill and courage. Next, I will test your judgment and creativity. We shall see if humans can face challenges beyond calculation. We shall see if you can handle the unexpected, the dangerous, and the unknown." Eli felt a mix of excitement and tension. He knew that the first challenge had proven humans' skill, but the real test was only beginning. The Queen's trials were legendary, designed to push even the strongest and smartest beings to their limits. Yet he also knew something important. Humans thrived under challenges that required adaptation, creativity, and courage, even when the odds seemed impossible. The room seemed to hold its breath. Every delegate watched Eli, knowing that a small human had dared to stand before the alien queen, and that his actions might shape the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. Eli straightened his back and looked directly at the queen. "I am ready for whatever comes next," he said. His voice was calm, steady, and full of determination. The queen's eyes glowed brighter, and for a moment the hall seemed to vibrate with anticipation. "Very well," she said. "The next trial will not be simple. Prepare yourself, human. The galaxy watches." And with that, the hall plunged into tense silence once again, the energy of the Nexus alignment grid now steady and bright, a testament to human courage, intelligence, and the power of standing firm when others hesitate. For Eli, there was no turning back. He had dared to act when the galaxy held its breath. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and judgment, and had emerged victorious. Now he would face challenges that no human or alien had ever faced before. And in the back of his mind, he realized one undeniable truth. Sometimes, being human in a universe of giants was not a weakness. It was the greatest strength of all. The hall had quieted again after the stabilization of the Nexus alignment grid. Delegates looked on with a mix of admiration and disbelief, their alien features reflecting curiosity they had never shown before. Eli Carter stood near the glowing grid, his hands still tingling from the adjustments he had made. He felt a surge of both pride and apprehension. The alien queen had praised his skill, but he knew her next test would be far more difficult. The queen's massive form rose from her throne, casting a shadow across the vast hall. Her golden eyes glowed brighter than before, focusing entirely on Eli. "Human," she said, her voice echoing through every corner of the chamber, "your abilities have surprised me. Yet skill and courage alone are not enough. Knowledge alone cannot predict the unpredictable. Now you will face a trial of ingenuity. You will confront a challenge designed to test your creativity, your adaptability, and your capacity to think beyond calculation." Eli nodded, though his pulse quickened. He had faced problems before, both on Earth and in the Galactic Council, but nothing of this scale. Still, he remembered the lessons he had learned as an engineer and problem solver. Observe carefully, trust your mind, and remain calm under pressure. The Queen lifted her hand, and the floor beneath the interstellar communicator shifted. A section of the chamber sank, revealing a maze of twisting metal corridors and glowing conduits filled with sparks and shifting lights. The maze was alive with energy, pulsing like a living organism. Holographic walls projected complex patterns that moved unpredictably. "This is the labyrinth of flux," the Queen said, her voice echoing. "It is a structure built to test those who claim mastery over energy and systems. Every path is unstable. One wrong step can trigger a cascade that disrupts the entire maze. No being has traversed it successfully in its entirety. Your task is to reach the core, stabilize its energy flows, and emerge unharmed. You have 2 hours. Fail, and you will be removed from the trial by council judgment." The hall murmured. Many of the delegates doubted that a human could succeed. The labyrinth of flux was infamous across the galaxy, a test that had defeated even the most advanced alien minds. Yet Eli did not falter. He tightened his grip on his toolkit, which included small devices for measuring energy flows, adjusting conduits, and repairing minor structural failures. He stepped into the maze. Immediately, the walls shifted around him, forcing him to adapt to changing pathways. Sparks danced along conduits, creating a soft, electric hum that vibrated through the metal floors. Eli took careful steps, analyzing the patterns of the energy pulses and how they affected the structure. He realized quickly that brute force or random attempts would only lead to failure. Observation was key. As he moved deeper, he encountered the first challenge, a section of the floor that vibrated violently with unstable energy. A single misstep could send a pulse that would knock him off balance. He paused, studying the rhythm. Then, with careful timing, he leaped forward, landing safely on a stable section. Each step required patience, focus, and precision. Hours seemed to pass in minutes as Eli navigated the maze. The walls continuously changed, forcing him to rethink his approach at every turn. Some paths appeared safe, but were traps designed to redirect energy flows toward instability. Eli used small probes from his toolkit to test each path, watching how energy pulsed and shifted in response. Along the way, he discovered a series of energy nodes, each one a miniature puzzle of wires, conduits, and pulses. The nodes were interconnected, so adjusting one affected several others. Eli realized that the key was not to tackle each node separately, but to understand the system as a whole. He began mapping the energy flows in his mind, predicting how one adjustment would ripple through the labyrinth. At one point, a section of the maze collapsed, forcing Eli to improvise a bridge from loose metal panels and a stabilized energy conduit. He worked quickly, combining mechanical skill with his understanding of the energy system. As he crossed the bridge, he could feel the pulse of the maze itself reacting to his presence, testing his ability to adapt. The queen observed silently from above, her golden eyes following every movement. "Interesting," she murmured, her voice carrying a tone of curiosity. "The human adapts, improvises, and overcomes. Few species can manage this level of unpredictability. Yet the labyrinth has more surprises in store." Soon, Eli reached the second major challenge, a chamber where energy flows collided, creating turbulence that pushed objects and potentially himself off balance. The floor was unstable and conduits pulsed dangerously. Eli could see that any direct approach would fail. He paused, analyzing the patterns of the energy turbulence. Then he noticed something small but crucial, a hidden channel beneath the main floor, carrying a portion of the energy flow in a stable loop. It was nearly invisible, yet it offered a way forward. Eli adjusted his toolkit, creating a temporary stabilizer that redirected energy from the turbulent floor into the hidden channel. Slowly, the turbulence subsided, creating a safe path for him to move forward. The delegates in the hall murmured in amazement. No human had ever shown this level of ingenuity in the council, and many aliens were beginning to see a new possibility, that humans could face problems that even their most advanced minds struggled with. Eli pressed onward. The final section of the labyrinth of flux was the most dangerous. Energy flows converged from all directions, forming a chaotic pattern that defied prediction. Sparks leapt unpredictably, and conduits shifted violently. The walls themselves seemed to pulse, closing and opening pathways at random. Here, instinct and creativity were more important than any tool. Eli realized that trying to stabilize the entire system at once would fail. Instead, he focused on the nodes closest to him, stabilizing each one in sequence and allowing the energy to naturally balance itself. It was a combination of strategy, observation, and adaptation, a method that aliens rarely used, relying instead on brute calculation. Hours passed and the maze began to respond. Energy flows gradually synchronized, sparks dimmed, and the shifting walls slowed. Eli's mind raced, but he remained calm. Every adjustment required care, but his intuition guided him. The labyrinth of flux was alive, testing not just skill, but also creativity, problem-solving, and courage under pressure. Finally, he reached the core of the labyrinth, a massive energy node pulsing with unstable power. One wrong move could send the entire maze into chaos. Eli studied the flows carefully, noticing subtle rhythms in the energy pulse. Using his tools and intuition, he adjusted conduits, redirected energy, and created stabilizers. Slowly, the node's pulse became steady, rhythmic, and controlled. A soft glow spread through the labyrinth and the shifting walls froze in place. The maze was fully stabilized. Eli stepped back, breathing deeply. He had succeeded. In the hall, the delegates were silent, their jaws dropping in astonishment. Few had imagined that a human could navigate the labyrinth of flux, much less stabilize its chaotic energy. The alien queen rose from her throne, her massive form towering over the chamber. "You have done the impossible," she said, her voice echoing with respect. "You have faced a challenge no other species has overcome. You have shown ingenuity, courage, and adaptability. Humans, you are remarkable." Eli nodded, exhausted but proud. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said. "It was a test of understanding, not strength." Observation, adaptation, and creativity made the difference. The queen studied him silently for several moments, then spoke again. "Indeed, you have proven that skill alone is not enough. One must also understand, adapt, and innovate. Your actions today show the value of humans in ways few would believe." Delegates whispered among themselves, many beginning to see humanity in a new light. Eli's courage, intelligence, and creativity had earned him respect across the galaxy, showing that humans could tackle problems that seemed impossible. The queen continued, her golden eyes glowing with curiosity. "You have passed the trial of ingenuity. Yet do not think this is the end. The final trial will test your judgment, leadership, and ability to handle situations where rules fail and unpredictability reigns. Prepare yourself, human. Your greatest challenge still awaits." Eli took a deep breath, realizing the truth of her words. The first two trials had tested skill and adaptability, but the final trial would test every part of him: courage, intelligence, creativity, and the ability to lead others in uncertainty. He looked around at the vast hall, at the watching delegates, and at the glowing labyrinth of flux. He understood something clearly. Humans had already made their mark, but the journey had only begun. One thing was certain: human ingenuity and courage would not be underestimated again. The hall was quiet, almost holding its breath, as Eli Carter stepped back from the stabilized labyrinth of flux. Every delegate, from the smallest floating creature to the largest armored giant, stared at him in disbelief. Humans had already proven courage and ingenuity, but the queen's voice, echoing across the chamber, reminded everyone that the greatest test was yet to come. "You have mastered skill and ingenuity," the queen said, her voice deep and commanding, vibrating through the hall. "Now you will face a challenge that tests judgment, foresight, and leadership. Many have failed here, not because they lacked strength or knowledge, but because they could not make the right choices when the outcome was uncertain." Eli straightened, feeling both tension and anticipation. He had survived 2 trials already, but he knew this one would be unlike anything before. He had to think clearly, act decisively, and above all, remain calm under pressure. The queen waved her hand, and the floor of the hall shifted again. A vast holographic star map unfolded, stretching from one end of the chamber to the other. Dozens of glowing nodes represented planets, colonies, and stations across the galaxy. Lines of energy traced paths between them, showing trade routes, communication channels, and areas of strategic importance. "This," the queen continued, "is the galactic convergence grid. A minor misalignment in one sector could escalate into a chain reaction, causing disasters across multiple systems. Your task is to identify the most critical points, make strategic adjustments, and prevent cascading failures. You will have limited time, limited resources, and no assistance. Your decisions must balance immediate action with long-term stability. Fail, and the consequences will be disastrous, even if only for this simulation. Succeed, and you will earn respect across the galaxy." Eli stepped forward and examined the map. The challenge was daunting. He could see hundreds of nodes, each connected in complex ways. Energy pulses flickered erratically, indicating instability. One wrong adjustment could redirect energy flows disastrously. The task required careful analysis, sharp judgment, and quick action. He remembered the lessons from the previous trials: observe patterns, adapt, and prioritize. But this trial required more than technical skill. It demanded leadership, decision-making, and the ability to predict the consequences of each choice. Eli took a deep breath and began analyzing the map. He noticed clusters of instability near the outer edges of the network. They seemed small at first, but their position indicated that failure there could ripple inward, affecting the core systems. These were his priority points. Using a small control panel projected in front of him, he began making adjustments. First, he reinforced the energy conduits of the outer nodes, redirecting excess flows to prevent overload. Sparks of light flashed as the system responded to his actions. Some pulses stabilized, while others shifted unpredictably. Eli remained calm, adjusting his approach with each observation. Delegates watched in silence, many whispering to each other in disbelief. Humans had never been tasked with such a complex, high-stakes decision. The idea that one human could assess risks, weigh consequences, and act decisively in real time amazed even the most advanced alien minds. Suddenly, a node in the center of the map began to pulse dangerously. It was a critical junction, linking multiple sectors. Eli realized that if it failed, the energy surge would spread like wildfire across the entire network. He paused to think, calculating the potential outcomes. "Immediate action is necessary," he murmured, almost to himself. He adjusted the conduits, redirecting energy from the central node into nearby stabilization fields. The pulse steadied, but new instabilities appeared elsewhere. The challenge was relentless. Every action had consequences, and he had to stay one step ahead. Time seemed to slip by. The map glowed brighter as energy flows shifted in response to Eli's adjustments. Some nodes that appeared stable became unstable, while previously dangerous areas calmed. Eli had to anticipate how each adjustment would affect the entire system. His mind worked rapidly, balancing risk, reward, and long-term consequences. The queen observed silently from her throne, her golden eyes following every movement. "Interesting," she murmured. "The human does not rush. The human plans, adapts, and acts strategically. Few species can maintain this clarity under pressure." Eli reached the final stage of the trial, a cluster of nodes near the heart of the network that had become dangerously unstable. These nodes controlled energy flow to dozens of inhabited systems. Failure here would cause cascading problems that could simulate catastrophe across entire sectors. He studied the patterns carefully. Unlike the previous trials, where solutions were mechanical or predictable, this required intuition, judgment, and foresight. He couldn't stabilize everything at once. He had to prioritize and make calculated choices. He began with the most vulnerable node, using his tools to reinforce its conduits and redirect excess energy. Sparks leapt dangerously, but he stayed calm, following the patterns he had observed. Once the node stabilized, he moved to the next, applying the same careful strategy. As he worked, the delegates whispered among themselves. "He is doing what no one else could," said one, a tall being with translucent wings. "He sees the network as a living system, not a static structure. That is extraordinary." Minutes passed, and Eli's efforts began to show results. The chaotic pulses of energy started to align, forming a stable flow throughout the network. The hall's glowing lights reflected the steady rhythm of the simulation. Delegates leaned forward, realizing that a human was not just participating, but leading the system to stability. Finally, Eli reached the central node, the heart of the network. It pulsed violently, threatening to destabilize everything he had achieved. He paused, thinking carefully. One final adjustment, one calculated decision, could stabilize the entire grid or cause catastrophic failure. He focused on the patterns, the subtle rhythms of energy, and made a precise adjustment, redirecting power in a controlled flow and reinforcing stabilization fields. The node's pulse steadied, and the energy grid across the simulation became uniform and steady. A collective gasp filled the hall. Delegates stared at Eli in awe. Even the queen, towering and imposing, leaned forward slightly, her expression unreadable. "You have done what few could imagine," the queen said, her voice reverberating through the chamber. "You have demonstrated not only skill and ingenuity, but judgment, leadership, and foresight. You have managed a network more complex than any other being could comprehend and maintain stability in the face of unpredictable consequences. Humans, perhaps I underestimated you." Eli stepped back, exhausted but proud. The simulation had tested every part of his mind, yet he had succeeded. For the first time, he realized that humans had something the galaxy often overlooked: the ability to act decisively under uncertainty, to balance creativity with logic, and to take responsibility for choices even when the outcome was unknown. Delegates murmured their approval, some bowing slightly in respect. Conversations spread across the hall, acknowledging the humans' remarkable performance. Eli's actions had shifted the perception of humans forever. The queen's eyes glowed warmly, and she spoke again, her voice softer but commanding. You have passed the trial of judgment. You have shown that humans are not merely small and fragile creatures, but beings capable of extraordinary thought, decision-making, and leadership. The Council will remember this day. Your people will be seen in a new light. Eli nodded, understanding the significance of her words. This trial had been about more than skill or intelligence. It had been about demonstrating that humans could handle responsibility, adapt to complex systems, and make decisions that affected the fate of many. He looked around the hall at the watching delegates and the glowing network that now pulsed steadily. He understood that humans had finally earned recognition not through brute strength, but through ingenuity, courage, and judgment. The Queen raised her hand, signaling the end of the trial. The simulation faded, leaving the hall quiet and still. Delegates began to clap, or in some cases emit harmonious tones of approval. Eli stood tall, feeling a sense of pride mixed with humility. He had faced challenges that no human or alien had ever faced before, and he had succeeded. Yet he knew the final trial awaited. The Queen's voice, echoing in the chamber, reminded him that the ultimate test was still to come. "Prepare yourself, human," she said, her golden eyes fixed on him. "The final trial will test your spirit, your resolve, and your ability to shape the future itself. The galaxy watches. Fail, and the consequences will be great. Succeed, and you will earn a place in history." Eli took a deep breath, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the thrill of possibility. He had faced skill, ingenuity, and judgment. Now the final trial would push him to his limits, but he was ready. Humans had already proven that they could rise to challenges no one else dared face. And in that moment, Eli understood the truth that had carried him this far. Humans were not weak, small, or fragile. They were capable of extraordinary courage, creativity, and leadership, qualities that could change the galaxy itself. The hall was tense as the Queen rose from her throne, her iridescent exoskeleton catching the light in every shade of blue and gold. Eli Carter had passed the trials of skill, ingenuity, and judgment. Yet the Queen's eyes gleamed with a mixture of curiosity and challenge. She knew that the final trial would be unlike any before, a test not of machines or grids, but of spirit, courage, and the ability to act under ultimate responsibility. "You have proven skill, creativity, and judgment, human," the Queen said, her voice echoing across the hall. "But the final trial will test your ability to face the unknown, to make decisions when outcomes are uncertain, and to protect not only yourself but others. This is the trial of leadership under chaos." Eli's pulse quickened. He had trained for emergencies, faced impossible situations, and even navigated deadly machinery, but he sensed that this trial would push him to his absolute limits. Around him, the alien delegates watched silently. Many whispered in disbelief. Humans had already exceeded expectations, but few believed that any being could succeed in this ultimate challenge. The Queen waved her massive hand, and the floor of the hall shimmered, transforming into a holographic simulation of a star system in crisis. Planets spun on their axes, moons orbited rapidly, and a glowing network of interstellar conduits connected colonies across the system. Energy surges raced along the lines, threatening to overload and collapse entire settlements. "This is the celestial convergence simulation," the Queen said. "You must stabilize the system. Do so, and you will show that humans are capable of leadership at the highest level. Fail, and you will fail in the eyes of the Council." Eli stepped forward, his hands steady despite the weight of responsibility pressing upon him. The simulation was complex. Every energy conduit affected multiple planets, and each decision had consequences that could ripple unpredictably. He realized that success would require quick thinking, courage, and precise judgment. He began by observing the patterns of instability. Energy surges moved like living rivers, converging on critical junctions. One wrong adjustment could send a pulse across multiple systems, creating a cascade of failures. Eli quickly identified the most dangerous nodes, planets with high population density and colonies dependent on stable energy flows. With calm determination, he started to make adjustments. Using his toolkit, he rerouted energy-reinforced conduits and created temporary stabilizers. Sparks flew along the holographic lines, and pulses of energy shifted unpredictably. He acted swiftly, yet with care, knowing that hesitation or error could trigger catastrophe. The first few adjustments stabilized key planets, allowing colonies to remain safe. Eli's mind raced as he calculated how each change would affect the entire system. Unlike previous trials, this one required balancing immediate action with long-term strategy. He couldn't just fix nodes sequentially, he had to anticipate consequences and plan moves several steps ahead. As he worked, the Queen observed silently, her golden eyes tracking every movement. "Interesting," she murmured. The human acts decisively, yet considers the larger picture. Few species could manage such complexity under pressure. Suddenly, a massive surge threatened the core planet of the system, the one whose stability maintained the balance of the entire simulation. The pulse raced along multiple conduits, approaching the critical junctions. Eli recognized the danger immediately. If he didn't act, the entire system could collapse in seconds. He took a deep breath and implemented a high-risk solution. Using a combination of redirection and stabilization fields, he guided the surge into auxiliary channels, preventing overload. The energy responded, pulsing violently before settling into a steady rhythm. Eli's heart pounded, but his mind remained focused. Delegates gasped in the hall. Many had expected failure. Few had believed that a single human could manage such a crisis. Eli's actions were precise, calculated, and fearless. He moved from node to node, reinforcing energy flows, anticipating surges, and stabilizing the system piece by piece. Time passed, and the simulation reached its most critical stage. A series of cascading surges threatened to destabilize multiple planets simultaneously. Eli's fingers flew across his controls, adjusting conduits, activating stabilizers, and predicting the outcomes. The energy pulses surged, shifted, and gradually settled under his careful guidance. Around him, the hall was silent, the delegates watching in awe. Some whispered that no species, alien or human, could have handled this trial with such composure and skill. Eli, despite exhaustion, remained fully alert. He knew that this moment required both courage and the ability to stay calm in chaos. Finally, he reached the last critical junction. Two massive energy flows converged, threatening to create a supercharged pulse that could destroy the central planet and destabilize the system. He paused, studying the patterns. One wrong move could undo all his previous efforts. Eli's mind raced, calculating risks and possibilities. Then, trusting his intuition and experience, he made a precise adjustment. He rerouted the converging flows through reinforced conduits, synchronized energy pulses, and activated secondary stabilizers. Sparks leapt across the holographic grid, and the energy surged violently before finally settling into a smooth, steady rhythm. The simulation glowed uniformly, planets and colonies pulsing safely in their orbits. Eli stepped back, breathing heavily. He had succeeded. The system was stabilized. A wave of astonishment swept across the council hall. Delegates erupted in sounds of approval, some clapping, others producing harmonious tones of praise. Even the Queen, massive and imposing, leaned forward slightly, her golden eyes reflecting a mix of pride and curiosity. "You have done it, human," the Queen said, her voice echoing powerfully. "You have faced chaos, uncertainty, and risk. You have made decisions that affected countless lives, simulated though they were, and you have succeeded. You have proven skill, ingenuity, judgment, and leadership beyond what I expected. Humans, you are remarkable." Eli nodded, exhausted but proud. This was more than a personal achievement. It was proof that humans, often underestimated for their small size and simple appearance, could rise to challenges that no other species could. They could think creatively, act decisively, and take responsibility in moments of uncertainty. The Queen gestured to the council. "Witness what humans are capable of. Not through brute strength, not through technology alone, but through courage, intelligence, and the ability to act when others hesitate. Let this be a lesson to all." Delegates whispered among themselves, many bowing slightly or producing respectful tones. Humans had proven themselves. For the first time in galactic history, a human had not only survived the Queen's trials, but had outshone expectations in every measure. Eli looked around, noticing the subtle changes in perception. Some aliens who had doubted humans now regarded them with respect. Others began to see humanity as a species that could contribute to solving galaxy-wide problems, not as small and fragile beings to be ignored. The Queen's voice cut through the murmurs. "Eli Carter, human of Earth, you have passed all trials. You have shown the galaxy that your species is capable of extraordinary courage, intelligence, and leadership. From this day forth, humans shall have a voice in the council. You have earned a place not through domination or force, but through your mind and spirit. Eli's heart swelled. Recognition on this scale was unimaginable. Humanity had stepped onto a galactic stage, not as weak participants, but as capable, respected contributors. The weight of responsibility and the thrill of accomplishment intertwined within him. He stepped forward, bowing slightly to the Queen. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said. "I will do my best to represent humans with honor, responsibility, and courage." The Queen's golden eyes softened slightly. "See that you do," she said. "Your actions today have changed perceptions. Your people will now be seen as beings capable of shaping the galaxy, not through force, but through ingenuity, courage, and wisdom." As Eli looked around the hall, the interstellar communicator hummed softly, its light pulsing steadily. The simulation of the celestial convergence grid faded, leaving a sense of awe and respect in its place. Delegates began discussing plans, some seeking guidance from the newly recognized human, while others reconsidered old assumptions about humanity. For Eli, the moment was transformative. He had faced every challenge the Queen had thrown at him: skill, ingenuity, judgment, and leadership, and emerged victorious. Humanity had earned a new place in the stars, not through conquest, but through intelligence, courage, and the willingness to stand when others hesitated. As the council adjourned, the Queen addressed him once more. "Human, the galaxy watches now. Your species has potential beyond what many imagined. Guard it, nurture it, and never forget that courage and intellect can change the course of worlds." Eli nodded, feeling the enormity of her words. He looked out over the stars, seeing countless systems and colonies that humanity could now influence positively. The journey of humans in the galaxy had only begun, but the first step had been taken, and it was a bold one. The hall emptied slowly, delegates leaving with newfound respect and curiosity about humans. Eli remained for a moment, gazing at the interstellar communicator, reflecting on the trials, the lessons, and the proof that even a single human could make a difference across the galaxy. And in that moment, Eli knew it was true. Sometimes being small, adaptable, and fearless was not a weakness. It was humanity's greatest strength. The stars outside the hall twinkled like never before, as if welcoming a new species to their rightful place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. Eli Carter smiled quietly. Humanity had arrived.